Can you see how some of the seed husks have stayed attached to the leaf? It's not really going to do them any harm, but you can just remove them. Then what I want to do is to actually thin these down. These are multi-sown, if you remember. And if we take the golden burpees here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We want no more than 5, and ideally down to 4. So I'm not going to pull them out, I'm going to cut them down. Now I know I said when we sowed these that they can often produce more than one seedling from the seed. So you may be thinking, why are you putting 4 seeds in there? Well, equally, it may only produce you 4.
That one's only done 4, I think.
That's only done 4, hasn't it?
4 or 5. Yeah.
So really you're just hedging your bets. And it doesn't take long just to thin them out and leave them with 4 nice strong seedlings. I'd like to thank you all for your wonderful comments following our tomato sowing video. We were so inspired by all the many different varieties that you all grow that we've decided to grow a couple of them ourselves to give them a try. You know, we all get used to our favourites and there's nothing wrong with that, but don't let it be a barrier to you for trying different varieties of veg. Not just tomatoes, it could be a different variety of cabbage or potato or whatever. You could always still grow your favourites and just have a couple of plants of something else that you might want to try. You never know, you might just absolutely love it. But yeah, you really did inspire us by giving us all those wonderful varieties, and we do so love getting your comments, we really do. But today's programme is not about tomatoes. Oh no. Today's programme is all about our top tips for the month of March. Hello and welcome back to the No Dig Norfolk Gardener. March is a month where things really begin to ramp up because not only are we tied to places like the polytunnel doing all the sowing, there will come a point in this month where we shall start planting things out into the plots. Some days in March can actually be colder here than it is in December. It's not feeling too warm today in this wind, is it, Mrs. W?
No.
But in general, we will get much warmer days and the soil will start to slowly warm up. Of course, the days are lengthening all of the time now, and that means that our plants that we have currently in the greenhouse, they're wanting to get away and grow. But our well-pampered plants are not suited to going out into the plot unless the conditions are right. So our first top tip is when you do go to plant anything out into your plots, do ensure that the conditions are right. Never plant into frozen soil. Do check the weather forecast, not just the next couple of days, but if you can, the long-range forecast for a week or more. Because if you're suddenly going to get frost over the next few days, those plants aren't going to like it. They need a period of time to get their roots down into the ground so that they can survive such things. Yes, you can mitigate these things with fleece or mesh, but in the main, the conditions do want to be right before you put those into the soil. As you know, we've already planted some potatoes into tubs to start them off a few weeks earlier. But March heralds the beginning of the potato growing season outside. Certainly for us here in our 9A zone garden. toward the end of March, we should be planting out our first earlies and second earlies and main crops. They all go in at the same time, and that's our next tip. You'll often hear people say, put your first earlies in toward the end of March, second earlies mid-April, main crop towards the end of April. Don't mess about doing that. Get them all in at the same time. And there are very good reasons for doing that. First and foremost, all you need to understand is that the difference between the potatoes is that first earlies will take 10 to 12 weeks to give you a harvest. Second earlies, 12 to 16 weeks. Main crops, 20 weeks plus. By planting them all at the same time, certainly for us here, if I plant our main crop potatoes in March, they'll be ready by the end of July to come up and out of the ground. And as we all know, and as we found out last year too, to our cost, once we tip past July and into August, that's when the real danger of late blight is real. We put some potatoes into some tubs, didn't we, Mrs. W?
We did.
And by the end of September, beginning of October, we'd lost everything. They were devastated by blight. That's because we had a very wet end to August, beginning of September, and then it got really warm. We suddenly had balmy temperatures of 30 degrees towards the end of September, didn't we?
Yeah, yeah. That was such a shame because they were looking such lovely
They were,
plants
weren't they?
as well, weren't they?
They
Yeah,
were
it's quite
indeed.
devastating when that happens.
They were. So if you can, one of the advantages of planting your first and second early potatoes and not growing main crop potatoes is that they are, in general, they're usually up and out of the ground before blight is likely to strike. So if you plant your main crop potatoes at the end of April, they're not going to be ready for you to lift until September. And if they're a variety that takes quite a while, Golden Wonder comes to mind. I remember we grew that one year and it was October before we could harvest them, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Then there is a real danger that they could be wiped out by blight. First shoots of the raspberries, Mrs. W.
I know. Coming through nicely, aren't they?
Ah,
These are the autumn ones as well, aren't they?
they are. But I have looked and we have leaves already on our summer fruiting raspberries.
Yes.
And I guess that's because it's been really a very mild winter. Really, we've seen very little in the way of frosts. Daytime temperatures have basically been 10 degrees or more, haven't they? It's been the odd day when it's been very cold, and cold overnight when we have seen frost. But, you know, normally they're about through January, through February, and into the beginning of March. Haven't really seen that, have we?
Not a huge amount, no.
But you saw me just breaking up some of this horse manure that I managed to acquire. And if you saw our February top tips, we set about making your final prunings of any soft fruit. But now this month, it's a good idea to feed the soil that they grow in. They're just as hungry as any of your other vegetables, and it will help you achieve a really good harvest. Your own compost is a great addition, just as it is to your veg plots. But as I say, I managed to acquire some well-rotted horse manure, and so I've spread that around there. And it's a local guy where we got it from, so I do know that they're not using any chemicals on the pasture where the horses are. And this has been rotting down for a good year. You can see our rhubarb is now beginning to shoot too. Up until this year, we didn't have any rhubarb that was particularly early. It's never really been an issue to us, but it's why ours is only now beginning to sprout. But just as with your soft fruit, it's a really good idea to feed your rhubarb. You can see that I've put that manure all around the outside of the plant. Don't ever cover the crown with it or with your compost, because it will rot the crown and then you won't have any rhubarb to eat. And then, just as in our no-dig veg plots, the worms and soil life will take that down into the soil, and that will nourish the soil to feed this rhubarb. And this is the new rhubarb that we've put in. It's a variety called Timpani Early. So you can see the difference in how more advanced this is, even though it's only a year old. You can see how much more advanced this is than the last two that we looked at. My next top tip is that by the end of March, you want to be harvesting any remaining leeks out of the ground. And that's because they will rise to flower as we tip into April. And leeks are really good. You can process them and freeze them and still have the taste of some lovely leek longer into the year. With the parsnips, any time from now you want to be lifting those. You'll start to see very soon that they will start to produce their green leaves. And that's something you don't want to do, because those leaves, they will be feeding on the natural sugars that make the parsnips sweet to power their growth and go into flower to set their seeds. But of course, if you're going to leave some on purpose to get your own seed, then obviously leave some in the ground. And also, the flowers are absolutely stunning and beautiful to look at, and the wildlife really do love those flowers. So if, unlike us, you have the room to leave some dotted about, they're going to look stunning in the garden, you're going to look after the wildlife, and if it's not an F1 variety, you can gather your own seed. My next top tip is to stake your broad beans. If, like us, you planted these out the back end of last year, in these case these went in last week in November, wasn't it?
I think it was, yeah.
So that the winds that you can probably hear today on my microphone won't break them, they'll just help to support them. But they do want to be uncovered now. These have been covered since then, because it won't be too long before we'll need the pollinators to come in and help pollinate the flowers. Now, you could be using string for this particular part of the job, but if you remember when we made the hot composter a few videos back, those straps were actually meters long, weren't they?
Far too long, yeah.
So we've recycled them in order to complete this job. And these plants will eventually be up here. So as they grow, we have some more of this, and we will just repeat the same thing again. Now my next tip is, as ever, do keep on top of your weeds. They will keep coming. They do like the mild conditions of this year, just like your veg. You can see as I've been going around, I've got some in a bucket. If you just keep that with you all the time as you move from plot to plot, and then as you see the odd weed, yeah, just pull it up and put it in the bucket. The last thing you want is for those to take hold, and then when you come out here toward the end of the month, you'll be amazed just how much they've grown. You can see in the case of this grass, it's already trying to make a flower head, and that will spill all its seeds everywhere if you leave that for too long. You can probably see on the camera that the soil is nice and moist, but what that does do, it makes it difficult to hoe weeds. So if it's damp conditions like it is at the moment, then don't hoe, don't get your hoe working, pull them out by hand, because all you'll do is leave most of the root behind. March, of course, is a time when you can begin to plant things out into your plots. Hardy veg such as onions, radish, turnips and beetroot, they can actually start going into the plots after the middle of the month. What those plants won't like so much is if it's still like this and there are cold winds, which can still happen going into April. Here in the UK, we have things known as April showers, and then tend to be blustery. Plants won't like that so much, so it's a good idea to fleece them for the first few weeks of their life, so that the sun's rays can be trapped underneath and keep that environment warmer for longer, so that they get a good start to life. Towards the end of March will be the spring equinox, and that means that the clocks will spring forward by 1 hour. That will create even more light conditions for our plants to grow in. Do let us know in the comments what you're planning to do in March. I know there are lots of people that watch our channel that don't garden in the same conditions as us. You might still be under snow. You might still have really freezing conditions during January and February. Maybe March is a time when you're actually going to start on some of your garden projects. If so, do let us know what you're doing. We do love to hear from you, and I can assure you we do read them all. And I'm pretty sure that I reply to most of them. There can't be many I haven't replied to. Whatever you're doing in March, have a great gardening week, and we shall see you on the next one.